All right, everyone, welcome online. Welcome to everyone who's come to join us out tonight. This is the sixth installment in our Discernment series, and so thank you for joining us. We're going to open with a word of prayer, and then we're going to get things going. Father, once again, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for the opportunity to talk about things that matter. And we ask that you would be our guide and our teacher tonight. I pray you'd help me to communicate on this, on what you've laid on my heart, effectively and clearly, and that you would be with all my brothers and sisters who are joining in to listen. In Jesus' name, amen. I hear it just started to rain, which is always a good sign. So, all right. So again, thanks for coming out. Thanks for tuning in. And speaking of tuning in, tonight we're going to be tackling a topic that we haven't really addressed very much before: discernment in the digital domain. But before we dive into that, I want to take this opportunity to not only say thank you on behalf of, thank you to everyone who's worked hard to make this happen and to bring this to you, the tech team and everyone, as well as all the teachers. And I want to thank you to everybody who's joined in for your support always. With that, it means a lot to everyone who works hard. I also want to let you know that we're going to be extending this discernment series 1 week. So you're going to get a bonus 7th week next Monday. So that will be Monday, August 24th. And that is going to be the rollout of what is at least currently called the Emergence Statement on Ethnic and Cultural Unity. This is a document that's intended to make clear our church's stance on a lot of issues surrounding the current discussion over racism in our culture, and how we as the leadership believe that these conversations should be taking place, namely in a way that glorifies God and edifies the church. This document, of course, will be available to read on our website to anyone who wants to. But what you will get next week will be basically some extended commentary on it and an opportunity to possibly to ask questions live, although we're not exactly sure how the mechanics of that will work out yet. But the session will go live same time, same place next week. That is provided I haven't convinced everyone to cancel their Facebook accounts by the end of tonight. So we're really looking forward to that. I hope you'll join us for what I hope will be a Christ-honoring step towards clarity on some of this stuff. Speaking of clarity, tonight, as I've said, the topic is discernment in the digital domain. And at the outset, I just want to say that I do not pretend to be a tech expert. I couldn't write a line of code if someone had a gun to my head. And I purposely try to stay away from some of the big social platforms. I do have a Facebook account, and YouTube is for me, as I'm sure it is for many of you, a source of much procrastination. I am not, however, on Instagram. I've never used Snapchat, and I literally don't even know whether or not I have a Twitter account. I also recently came off a several-month-long hiatus from Facebook, during which I purposely deactivated my account. These are all my personal decisions, which I've made for in view of my own weaknesses, essentially, and my desire to use my time and my brain as wisely as possible. But I've been thinking about these things for quite some time. As a 41-year-old, I straddle the border between millennials and Gen Xers. Let's be honest, a little bit more on the side of the Gen Xers. And I've watched as the internet developed from BBS boards to what it is today. Back then, we couldn't have imagined carrying little devices in our pockets more powerful than the world's fanciest mainframe supercomputers. But although the specific directions technology would take have always been difficult to predict, the accelerated exponential growth that we have seen and continue to see in technology is not. This was predicted all the way back in the 1960s by one of the founders of Intel, a guy named Gordon Moore, who somewhat prophetically predicted that every year the number of transistors that would fit onto an integrated circuit of the same size would double. This became known as Moore's Law and has been accurate for almost the last 50 years or so, with roughly 40% annual growth in several different domains of digital technology. This year, Samsung produced a 5 nanometer node for future use in its semiconductors. A nanometer, by the way, is a billionth of a meter. Although eventually the laws of physics are expected to slow some of this growth, we should not be surprised that in 25 years from now, we will look back on today's tech as primitive, because the growth, again, is not only linear, but exponential. This is going to be especially so with the expected advent of quantum computing. In other words, the concerns we have about technology today are only going to compound in new and unexpected ways. On the other hand, the development of technology is kind of strange, and it reflects mankind's quirkiness and banality in what we are willing to get behind and devote our resources to. Innovation is almost by definition impossible to predict. PayPal and Palantir co-founder Peter Thiel famously quipped, "We wanted flying cars, instead we got 140 characters." Now that wording, by the way, somewhat dates that quote, because Twitter users are now allowed 280 characters, but you be the judge as to how much that actually improves the quality of our social discourse. Technology is an accelerant of both the best and worst parts of human nature. This is partly because science itself is more or less morally neutral. It can tell us how to harness nuclear energy, but not whether it should be used to power entire cities or to destroy them. There's no question that we derive benefits from many of the tools that are available to us in 2020 as I speak over a live stream onto your phones. But there's also no question that human evil can and often is amplified by these very technologies. Now, one of, if not the most relevant technologies that we need to be thinking of, and to which most of this talk will be devoted, is social media. The 5 biggest of these, according to Search Engine Journal, whose estimates I do not think many of us would dispute, are Facebook, with 2.45 billion monthly active users, Twitter, with 330 million monthly active users, LinkedIn, with 310 million, Instagram, with 1 billion active users, and Snapchat, with 360 million active monthly users. And although it's not really a social media platform, we should also mention YouTube, although it definitely has social media aspects to it, with its 2 billion monthly active users. It's important to acknowledge the positive benefits, I think, of each of these technologies. It's good to have ways to connect with friends and colleagues and to make new ones. It's good that there is a way to get information out to the world and to encourage robust dialogue about that information. It's good to have effective ways to advertise your business or your organization. And it's good to be able to find new interests and things that help us find and develop new interests as well. But at what cost? Every one of us could brainstorm the negative effects of social media, both on us as individuals and on the society as a whole. I spoke a minute ago of technology as an accelerant of human nature, an amplifier of both the good and the bad in us. And this should be especially concerning for those of us who hold a biblical worldview, because we affirm both the image of God in every human being But we also know that sin is inevitable in us and pervasive. And we know that this cannot be eradicated out of us or forced out by powers of government or taken care of through really stellar education or pressured out of us by collective opinions. Sin will always be here, this side of the consummation of all things in Christ. If Romans 1 is true, then the correct Christian perspective on humanity is a hopeful pessimism. The pessimism comes from what we are shown in this powerful passage in Romans 1, which tells us that ever since the creation of the world, human beings have suppressed the knowledge of God in unrighteousness, becoming futile in our thinking, with foolish, darkened hearts. We worship not God, but idols, images resembling mortal mans and birds and animals and creeping things. Language, by the way, purposely lifted and clearly lifted from Genesis, which is code for creation. We worship that which has been created rather than the one who is truly worthy of worship, the Creator. And God, we read, gives us up to impurity, to the dishonoring of our bodies, to dishonorable passions, and to debased minds to do what ought not be done. And this giving us up to our own sin that is talked about here is partly judgment for sin, and it's partly so that we can know the full destructive effects of our sin and turn to Him, much like the prodigal son was allowed to waste up all his inheritance and to end up coveting pig slop, and as a result returned in humility to his father who loved him. So there's a judgment aspect of that, and also a count his patience as kindness, as an opportunity for repentance aspect to it. The situation is summed up as Romans 1 comes to a close with what could very well be seen as a hauntingly accurate description of one's Facebook and Twitter feeds on any given day. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. And though they know God's decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. An amplifier of both the good and the bad in us. And the scriptures give us no illusion that there will be an even balance between the two, nor that we who call ourselves Christians will be immune to falling into such cesspools. One also thinks of the Tower of Babel, a story that rounds off those first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis. The essential point of these chapters is essentially to show how thoroughly human sin corrupts God's good creation, and to hold out the hope of the gospel as the only possible remedy. Here we see several rounds of depravity that just keeps on spiraling downwards, as if God is saying, if anything's going to change, you're going to need me to do something about it. You've got murder. You've got twisted justice and vengeance. You've got death overcoming everyone regardless of longevity. You've got humanity becoming so totally corrupt that God judges the earth with a flood and just starts over again. You've got the one righteous man failing and his son becoming corrupt. And here in chapter 11, you get the whole land, after the nations have started to spread out, coming together to pool their resources for the most magnificent testament to human skill and achievement thus far in history, a tower with its top into the heavens. But the Lord recognizes it for what it is, a monument to mankind's hubris, their own attempt to regain what sin had taken without true grace from God, right? It's their attempt to reestablish a connection with God through our own ingenuity. Modern technology is, in some sense, very much a modern Tower of Babel. And so, biblically speaking, we have grounds for pessimism, but hopeful pessimism, because we also know that God has given us the answer to sin. The gospel is the power of God for salvation. That is the hope. But as Paul will go on to remind us later on in Romans 8, we hope for what we do not yet see. That's why it's called hope. Now, when we think about social media, I think the promise is summed up in the aspirations of Facebook, bringing the world closer together. But it's worth asking, in view of a biblical understanding of human sin, is that goal an unfettered good? I think as Bible-believing Christians, we have reasons to be skeptical of the idea that a world brought closer together by the products of gigantic tech companies is in fact a good thing. We can all think of reasons why not. And probably the one that pops up the most easily into our heads is the fact that it is so much easier to be nasty to someone over a keyboard than it is face to face. There's a dehumanizing effect to typing letters on a screen that makes us do and say things that we would never dream of saying and doing in person. And that alone would be reason for extreme caution when using these platforms. But we can ask other questions as well. Is it a good thing, for example, that social media by its very nature makes human-to-human communication performative? Even with anodyne interactions that are jovial in nature and not heated debates over controversial topics, what are the effects on us psychologically when we believe that what we are saying and putting up there will be read and evaluated by other people who are invited to like and comment on it, even people whom we don't know and who don't know us? And what about when those conversations are about things that are controversial? How many times have you been engaged in a robust back and forth with someone, again, whom you might not even know, buried several levels into a comment thread with this little voice inside your head convincing you, oh, if you lose this one, everyone's going to think you're stupid? Think about how much higher the stakes are psychologically in moments like those, and the many ways that this erodes any constructive potential for either you or your online sparring partner. So we start with the general observation that people who engage for the purpose of debate are usually not the ones who are particularly open to having their minds changed. The person handing out watchtower tracts and proselytizing in the mall is probably not your most likely convert. More often than not, the person seeking to destroy you with facts and logic will probably not be stepping over the line to join you anytime soon. So there's certainly a certain futility to the whole endeavor. And this is not particularly unique to social media, right? But it's worth asking, what is the purpose of engaging such an individual? Are we concerned that a statement they made or an image that they shared will persuade others of their bad ideas? Do the innocent onlookers need to be made aware that there are people out there who think they're wrong, and they most certainly are wrong, possibly? And I've engaged for those reasons myself before, not saying I was right to do so. But I want to at least acknowledge that sometimes it doesn't make sense to get drawn in by this tractor beam of stupid social media post-Death Star. But of course, it's healthy to subject your own views to scrutiny, right? To drag them out into the public marketplace of ideas, and to interact with people who actually think differently, not just people who agree with you, who are telling you what people who disagree would think or say. It's best to interact with people who actually hold the views you're talking about. There can be benefit in this, even if it's only understanding what someone else thinks. That is a benefit in and of itself. But then again, how much do we actually achieve this on social media? Because remember, it's not just the conversation, it's a performance. Now your guard is up, and every concession comes with the risk of losing face in front of a crowd of cheering and jeering onlookers, sometimes real, often imagined. So you're locking horns with someone else under the pretense of doing something good and constructive, but with each passing response and rejoinder, the stakes of how you look to others, to your debating opponent, and to yourself are raising even higher and higher. And the stronger and more condescending your language gets, the more fear you have of ever adjusting your preconceived notions that brought you there in the first place. And this, of course, gets amped up further as likes and angry faces start to accumulate, whether it's someone chiming in to support you or to support them. Now either you are the spokesperson for people who are counting on you to win this thing, or you are a David versus Goliath, okay, versus a crowd of misinformed goons, and your prize for winning is no longer just one takedown, but 2 or 3 or 4. Now it's no longer about nuancing my own views. That's been left far in the dust. Or getting the best points during an argument, or even standing my ground in the face of falsehood. It's about something else. And it might even be about shaming my opponent now. Now, I'll move past this debating fantasy here in just a minute, but I feel that I need to squeeze 2 more cents in here. Social media promises us all our 5 minutes of fame, that people will love what I post, and that this will be seen for time immemorial as something witty and clever and attractive about me. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing or that it's mentally healthy for us to be thinking in that way, but given that it is in fact what we do when we're throwing stuff up there, we are presenting self-curated versions of ourselves. And if that's the case, it's worth thinking twice about what parts of ourselves we are putting out there, and what's worth saying and what's not. What do people know about me from what I say online? How is your gospel witness, your testimony to who Jesus is and what he has done in your heart and in your life affected by what you put up on the internet today? I want us to think about that. And I want us to think that we're not only called to reach out to people whom we agree with. I don't care how important you think whatever else you want to talk about is, it's not as important as reaching people with the gospel. And if the way that we talk about political issues, or the things we joke about, or the way we treat people inhibits our ability to bear witness effectively to Jesus Christ, then we are doing it wrong. You are not called to only reach people who agree with you. This spills into politics, but not only into politics. But let's use that as our example because it becomes very prevalent, especially in years like this, election years. You are on the right. Do you really want the left-leaning part of your missions field to think of you as some right-wing nut job who now wants to talk to them about Jesus? And you on the left, do you really want the right-leaning part of your missions field to think of you as that leftist Kool-Aid drinker who now wants to talk to them about Jesus. I'm not saying which political way is wrong. I'm not saying that neither one doesn't represent better the values that we as Christians should think and care about, right? But I am saying that polarization on a whole host of issues, not just overtly political ones, is not an effective strategy for building the kingdom of God. Either from the standpoint of bringing individuals to salvation, or in maintaining the kind of unity that we need in order to reflect Christ's reconciling work on the cross. Polarization is not a good tool for either of those. Your mission field is not restricted to people who think like you on any given number of ancillary issues, no matter how important you think those issues are. I'm not saying never talk about controversial stuff. I'm not saying don't take a position on things that you feel matter, but you have a choice of how to do that, and when to do that, and when not to do that. And as you figure out what the proper God-honoring balance is for you, that image of yourself that you are curating, either consciously or subconsciously online, you need to be doing it through the filter of asking, does this compromise my ability to share the gospel? And does this compromise my ability to live in unity with my brothers and sisters in Christ? Those two things are way more important than anything else we think we're doing when we open up those apps. Think about your social media timeline and ask yourself, how much does it line up with the way Paul describes his own ministry in 1 Corinthians 9? For though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. And I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessings. Let's pause there for some questions. Any thoughts or comments? I don't have that singular mic going around, but yeah, see if we've got any coming in online. It's quiet. Someone's talking about ping pong and fencing. I'm not sure what that is. Sorry, Donna, I don't know what that is. Any questions or thoughts from folks who are here tonight? Because I got plenty of other stuff to say. What a surprise. Yeah, Jen. Mm. Yeah. 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 Yep. Yeah. 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 Well, that's helpful. So, yeah, so for everyone listening online, so our sister here is sharing about the vitriol that she encounters on social media sometimes, and basically how nasty people are towards one another. And actually shared a helpful tip there, right? To take a step back and maybe come back, contemplate what a good Christian loving response is, and to offer it. I think that's a good way to be salt and light. Knee-jerk reactions are not always a good thing. One of my favorite proverbs, I think, kind of in line with what James says about being slow to speak and quick to listen, is don't ever ask me where it is. I can never remember Bible references, but even a fool seems wise when he keeps his mouth shut. And if that was our first order of business, and then as you recommend, figuring a good response from Scripture and injecting that in, we'd be better off for it. So, all right. Yes,
You spoke of being a full witness by the manners in which we communicate
Yeah.
online. Do you have any comments or thoughts about being a full witness with the content, actually? That there's such a thing as even being kind, still taking wrong positions, or failing miserably in an important debate, for example, that even though you might have the right Christian virtues, you're still being a full witness in terms of the content.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Guillaume actually makes a good point. On the other hand, things exactly what I would expect from you, Guillaume. I spoke about being a poor witness in terms of the manner in which we speak, and but Guillaume pointed out a poor witness in terms of the content. So we might be presenting something with a very good Christian loving character, but if it's wrong or they're dumb points, then that can also be a very poor witness. And I think that needs to be stated out there as well. One man's dumb is another man's smart, so it's not always easy to figure out, and usually it's never the thing that I'm saying. So, so that might be a little hard to discern, but I guess I would say that you should try to be careful not to jump into stuff online that when you don't know what you're talking about, if you like, and I say that knowing that there's plenty of things that I just don't know what I'm talking about, and just because you're being nice about it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be a good witness either. So it is important also to have accurate views. Manner and content are both important, and I don't mean to imply that the latter is not. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the ways in which social media intensifies toxic discourse and how we need to be on guard against it because we have a high calling as believers in Christ. By being aware of that and trying to run what we say through that filter, I believe we can greatly improve in this area, both in terms of content and in terms of manner. But I want to drill down a little bit right now into some reasons and share some reasons for concern to raise awareness of kind of what we're up against when we open up social media. Now, an original ambition for the internet is that it would improve society by being a better marketplace of ideas, a public platform where the best ideas would win out, and that it would provide us with tools to expand human potential. Steve Jobs famously said that a computer should be a bicycle for the mind. I love that idea. I think that's good. And in some ways, computers are that. But in other ways, they have introduced threats to our well-being that were not here before them. They have become more than bicycles, but motorcycles for weaknesses. That's me being clever, okay? So you can at least Smile at that. Now, if you're interested in knowing more about what I'm about to talk about, just heads up, I would recommend the work of both Tristan Harris and his partner Roger McNamee. That's Harris, you can probably spell that, and McNamee, M-C-N-A-M-E-E. Many of Harris's lectures have proved very enlightening to me on this, as has McNamee's book. His book is entitled Zucked, Waking Up to the Facebook Catastrophe. And another helpful work that I would recommend is The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, although that work is also on other stuff as well. These are voices calling attention to this, and they are the ones that have influenced me most recently on this journey, and I would highly recommend them. And I'll mention when I'm drawing explicitly from them. So when it comes to social media, okay, much of the problem boils down to the business model. The question is, what makes a media platform that is free to join and free to use valuable? How do you monetize a free network to the extent where it can take its place among the most valuable companies in the world? Facebook, as I understand it, is currently 6th. The answer is by selling advertising and by selling user data, and not only by selling those two things, but by packaging them in ways that increase their value to those who purchase them. Essentially, by building the perfect advertising machine. You do this by creating an attention economy, which is what all major social media platforms are based on, an attention economy. How can you hold a person's attention as often and for as long as possible? How can you design a platform so that it persuades a person to do that? Social media is a lot of things, but almost more than anything else, it is a persuasive technology. Here's how Sean Parker of Napster fame and the social network movie, right? Facebook's first president described the early years at the company in a 2017 interview with Axios. That's the publication, AXIOS. The thought process that went into building these applications, Parker says, Facebook being the first of them, was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you more likes and comments. It's a social validation feedback loop, exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. The name of that interview, by the way, is also very telling. Sean Parker unloads on Facebook, quote, "God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains." Now, much of the research behind building persuasive technologies into social media originated in Stanford University's Persuasive Technology Lab, founded by Professor B.J. Fogg, F-O-G-G. Here is McNamee's description of this. We should note, by the way, that Roger McNamee is no outsider to the industry. In 2006, he became a mentor to Mark Zuckerberg and was the one who convinced him not to sell Facebook to outside investors and urged Zuckerberg early on to steer away from the kind of business model that he would eventually adopt. And he writes this about the Stanford Persuasive Technology Lab. Professors at other universities teach the subject, but being at Stanford gave Fogg outsized influence in Silicon Valley. His insight was that computing devices allow programmers to combine psychology and persuasion concepts from the early 20th century, like propaganda, with techniques from slot machines, like variable rewards, and tie them to the human social need for approval and validation in ways that few users can resist. Like a magician doing a card trick, the computer designer can create the illusion of user control when it is the system that guides every action. Now, this describes a technique that Tristan Harris calls brain hacking. Now, a simple illustration of this would be to compare social media use with, as McNamee suggests, slot machines and other forms of what we might call low-stakes gambling. So imagine you're a stereotypical slot player. I don't know. Let's just throw it out there. A 78-year-old retiree who takes the bus to Atlantic City. Okay? Now let's say she's got $100 that she's willing to spend on slots. And you come up to her and you say, hey, listen, Lois, I can save you that lengthy trip to AC and all that time you'd spend in the casino. I've figured out the way to average the winnings of that $100 worth of slot machine pulls, and I'm just going to give you whatever that amount is in one shot for your $100. Heck, I'll even give you a $10 discount. Make it $90, I'll give it to you. You think she'd take that deal? Absolutely not. And if she did, do you think that she'd be more excited than she would be pulling down that lever for a couple of hours? Certainly not. And what about a slot machine that just took all $100 at once? I'm sure they exist. Of course not. And why? Because she would rather get the money converted into all those little tokens and sit there with her bucket and pull and pull and pull. There's something about the experience itself that draws you in. First off, there's the tactile experience. You feel that lever pull down, its pressure, and then its release. Same thing with scratch-offs, right? There's that little scraping that stuff off with the quarter. That's kind of satisfying. It's almost like those ASMR videos where people are just like carving soap. And then there's that audio, that little bell, that little chime. Hey, here's Facebook. I don't know if it'll come through, but that little thing, right? The little lips are a little dry. But anyway, it's all the little click and the buzz when you hit the like button, right? Think about the difference like between playing Bejeweled with the sound off and playing with it on. It's more satisfying to see all those jewels get shattered, accompanied by that little haptic buzz of this super compressed, satisfying little sound. There's the little delay, too, when you're waiting to hear what's going to come up, when you're waiting to see what's going to happen. What's going to drop next? Is this going to be the big one? Ba-jing, 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 right? Like, again, think of scratch-offs. It's no fun if it's just a card that you buy and then it says win or lose, right? Like, what fun is that? There has to be that moment of certainty combined with the tactile experience, that delay, that time when you experience that hope that next thing is going to be so awesome. And Bejeweled too, right? I know I'm kind of mixing examples here. Is this move going to start crushing all those other rooms of rubies and emeralds, clearing the whole screen? You know, when you do that, like you hit the one and suddenly everything falls into place and you're like, genius, so satisfying. And there's just a little, it's not a lot, it's a little bit of that again and again and again. Now think about all your social media apps. All of that is right there. There's that haptic feedback, that little buzz to make it feel like there's something really going on when you like that thing. There's the compressed sound that you hear when you refresh or when you enter or put something up. Did you ever wonder, by the way, why the need to refresh those apps? And there's that little load time delay, and even the anticipation that comes just from the mere scrolling. And what's going to be next? Is it going to be meh, or is it going to be something cool? It's never something so rewarding, right? So satisfying that you're just like, I'm done with Facebook, right? It's just enough to enjoy that little squirt of dopamine to trigger your reward center so that you stay on for longer. Think about, by the way, how much better the experience is when combined with the perfect accompaniment, the smartphone, right? Remember before that, social media, can you remember MySpace? Where it's just screens everything, right? Individual profiles all at once, rather than this continual, infinite, constantly generating feed. MySpace, seen it, been there, done that. Instead, it's scrolling. Oop, got to wait to load a second. What's coming? Okay, now scroll down that bottomless feed of slightly amusing posts, mildly amusing, like this, love that. When I do, there's that little haptic buzz and that catchy little pop, right? Mildly amusing. Send a tweet, get that little bird whistle. I know better than to try to whistle again when I'm in the middle of an hour-long talk. All right. Wait, oh my gosh, what's this? No! He said what? He did what? Well, now I have to look at this. And you're up against the next example of persuasive technology, outrage. What really keeps us engaged? Remember, the name of the game is being able to demonstrate, a company being able to demonstrate to people whom it wants money from, that how often it can get people to come back and stay on the site. And is it calm, sober, nuanced opinion that gets that? Okay, sure, I appreciate it when I see it as much as you do. That is well thought out. Thank you. So that gets a like. But the things that are most likely to get people engaged are blunt, strong opinions, especially when they're aimed at people or other groups. If it's a perspective that you share, it's one that implies that people who think otherwise are idiots or morally destitute. And if it's a perspective you don't share, all the better, because it makes your heart freak out and you have to stay on the site to see if are other people saying this crazy stuff too? How many people actually think that? I need to know now. The common denominator is that it's aimed at people who push your buttons, people who anger you, and people who outrage you. As a Christian, those are great impulses to be feeding all the time, of course. Now, all this time, the things you're being shown are not simply randomly generated. They are selected by constantly evolving algorithms produced by artificial intelligences that predict what will keep you engaged on this site and are aimed at persuading you to stay. The produced by artificial intelligence, as I realize, could be misunderstood. Just think algorithms, okay? What kind of things are going to generate the most clicks? What do you like? What do you love? What makes you angry? What do you click on to see the comments? What kinds of ads do you click on? What kinds of things have you searched for maybe on other platforms that have sold your data to this one? What things have you done that the social media AIs have picked up on that you're not even aware of? Welcome to the filter bubble. The ways in which increasingly intelligent algorithms suggest things to you, not based on what will enrich your life the most or help you to form balanced, well thought through opinions, or help you to spend your time in constructive and wise ways, but based rather simply on what keeps you engaged on their site the longest. You just finished watching an episode of Netflix. Well, you made it to the end, so that must mean you like the show. So we're just going to go ahead and queue up the next episode that's just going to go ahead and play automatically before the credits are even done rolling from this previous episode. And if you exit out, well, then here are hundreds of other recommendations of shows and movies that are watched by people who watch the kind of stuff that you watch. Or on YouTube, here, they're queued up right next to the ones that you're watching. You don't even need to switch screens. The motivating factor is time on the site. That's what they want. Not balancing things out that you're learning with opposing viewpoints, not giving you less extreme positions, but simply what is most likely to get you to click one more thing. And by the way, if you don't click that thing now, you have no idea when it's going to show up again in your feed, if ever. So you better click it now. This is what Harris calls an invisible asymmetry of power. Like a magician who pretends to have an equal relationship with the person picking a card, all the while knowing that he will pick exactly the card that the magician wants him to, social media presents itself as partnering with us. It presents itself as partnering with us and having an equal relationship that is contractual and mutually beneficial, and yet is heavily weighted by teams of psychological experts getting paid top dollar to find ways to keep us drawn in and to make their apps the ones we used, and those experts' knowledge is supercharged by the use of super intelligent algorithms, or at least algorithms that push us towards that. Indeed, to stay afloat in Silicon Valley, they almost have to do this, because if they don't, well, then there are plenty of other companies who are still looking to do that and who will gladly eat up your attention and collect your user data like piranhas in a feeding frenzy. Our time and our attention are limited commodities, and if they don't go one place, they're going to go to the other. Now, at the very least, Christians need to be aware of this and be on guard against it. Aside from some of the scriptures that I've already shared, I can think of a few other biblical insights that should cause us to be very critical of some of this stuff. The first is very simple, and it's what Paul says to us in Ephesians 5:15 through 16. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. As I said, time is not a renewable resource. You can't get it back once you've wasted it. And while we hear of the many ways technology can boost our productivity, the truth is that many of us waste a lot more time because of it than we would if it wasn't around. Like many of us, I lost internet last week. And I live where cell phone reception is not the greatest. And anyway, I don't have unlimited data on my phone. And the ability to focus, knowing that if I threw up my browser or one of those apps, it would just show up blank, was liberating. I got more reading done. I got more writing done. I got more time with my wife and my kids. I got to practice my instrument more. I would have jogged more, but my stupid IT band was messed up. Same thing when I deactivated my Facebook account, which I may do again. I can't tell you how nice it felt to just not be tempted to go scrolling. I can only describe it as a feeling of freedom, saying, wait, I don't have to do this? And what did I miss out on? I'll tell you, nothing much. How wisely are you using your time? I also think of that admonition beginning Romans 12, where Paul enters into the letter's ethical section, and he writes, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual act of worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your minds, that by testing you may prove what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Now, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that technology and even social media can play no role in the renewal of your mind. Few things in this world that have mass appeal only have downsides, okay? Maybe pineapple pizza, but I can't think of much else. What I can say is that you need to be very careful about who and what you allow to shape your mind. Obviously, this applies to content. What do you allow to entertain you? What narratives about the world do you accept? Whom are you letting persuade you? But also, know that the patterns of this world has to do both with the content we imbibe and the ideas we accept, yes, but also with the manner in which we hold these ideas and present them to others. So somewhat like what I was saying earlier, but with a nod to Guillaume, okay? You can, let me just say, you can believe some very correct things, but if you hold them arrogantly and display them pridefully and hurtfully, it can be just as bad as believing wrong things. And if that's what you're doing, know that at least if you believed wrong things, you'd be giving negative press to those wrong things. But if you're following a pattern of worldliness in how you present the right things that you think, then you might be doing almost more harm to the cause than you think you're helping, than you would if you just didn't say anything at all. Again, when you enter into the social media world, you are entering the playground of some of the biggest and most well-insulated companies in the world, in possession of some of the most advanced artificial intelligence known to man, seeking to monetize your experience on their platform, and doing this by attempting to persuade you to give more and more of your precious time to them. And it is far more likely that they are able to discover information about you than you will be able to hide it. Now, if you don't believe me, get on your devices and Google a company called Cursor Insight. Here's how they describe what it is that they do. Our hand gestures, eye and body movements often reveal more information than spoken words. Nonverbal information has been virtually invisible to human-computer interaction. We are changing this by predicting behavior, deducing latent personality traits, and helping diagnose health conditions using cursor or motion sensor data. Camera on your phone and the mouse or touchpad. Movement patterns reveal personality traits that drive intuitive buying behavior. Use our movement analysis technology to decode cursor gestures and better understand your customers. Match your messaging in real time to the personality of your visitor to increase conversation. Do what Cambridge Analytica did more effectively. In case it isn't clear, they're saying that simply based on the ways that you operate the inputs on your devices, the way you move your cursor or your mouse, they can know things about you, including what they call latent personality traits. Among these are listed personality traits, attitudes and emotions, moods, which they suggest can be used for targeting advertising, credit scoring, product and music recommendation, job applicant screening, and user and gaming experience assessment, as well as various healthcare applications for this technology, detecting neural disorders, psychological disorders, chemical influence, which they say can help with ADHD and Alzheimer's screening, the detection of tiredness and wandering off, measuring stress levels and medication management. And this is just one such company. Several are into it. Now, the point is not that such information would always be bad, right? Like, I bet that if I could learn that I am clinically depressed and get treatment before I ruin my life and alienate my loved ones, that could be a very good thing. But it also isn't hard to imagine what this kind of information and data can mean in the hands of someone intent on manipulating you into certain behaviors, or wanting to make some money by selling health data about you to insurance companies screening for pre-existing conditions. I use this as a vivid illustration of the asymmetric power relationship that, again, is not closing, but is widening. I encourage you to learn more about all this stuff. It may be a rabbit hole worth going down. But one more area I'd like to touch on in our time together has to do with what this technology appears to be doing to our kids. Here I follow some of the observations and insights made by Haidt and Lukianoff, but which have also been made by numerous others as well. Consider Generation Z, or as they've been called, iGen, short for internet, the internet generation. These are those born after 1995, who were 12 in 2007, when we saw the release of the perfect complement to the ever-growing social media platforms, the iPhone. This was just in time, by the way, for when Facebook changed its membership requirement in 2006 from needing to prove college enrollment to having to be at least 13 years old. Following the research of social psychologist Jean Twenge, Twenge. Anyone? I'm going to say Twenge, okay? Of San Diego State University, Haidt and Lukianoff talk about how members of iGen have spent more time glued to screens than any previous generation, corresponding to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and even suicide. These phenomena disproportionately affect girls, except actual suicide, which is still more common among boys, although this can be deceiving because boys sadly tend to use more effective methods. Girls still do have higher rates of attempts. Today, the suicide rate among teenage girls is twice what it was in the year 2000. In all honesty, various factors, at least for anxiety and depression, can be explained in other ways, such as a lower bar for diagnosis, right? And correlation does not always equal causation. But Twenge corrects for this by analyzing reported daily activity from a large sample of iGeners and finds only 2 activities significantly correlated with this alarming spike in depression, anxiety, and suicide, especially among girls. Here are the 2 things: the use of electronic devices and television consumption. By way of contrast, children who spent more hours of the week in activities like sports, religious activities, reading books and other print media, homework, and in-person interaction had the lowest incidence of these conditions. Her conclusion was that children who spend less than 2 hours a day on screens show no increase for risk of depression, but above that, above 2 hours, the risks grow higher and higher for each hour. And more can be learned about this in her book, iGen. Now, why is this more of a problem for girls than for boys? Although, make no mistake, boys are in danger of this too. Haidt and Lukianoff suggest 2 significant reasons. First, girls tend to care more highly about the curated versions of themselves fabricated on social media. Girls who are already more affected by being excluded from groups see images of friends engaging in activities that they weren't invited to, and stew on it for longer. Additionally, the curated versions of themselves that girls present often accentuate their physical attractiveness, even doing so by artificial digital means. And you can imagine how unhealthy it is for a teenage girl to be there sitting on her phone waiting for how many likes her new Facebook profile picture is going to receive. Or if someone is going to say something cold to her or mean to her, which leads to the second reason why girls are more adversely impacted by social media, and that is that they show aggression. Girls show aggression differently than boys tend to. Boys are more likely to be physical towards one another and hurl insults, but when they do, they kind of roll off their backs a little bit more easily. Girls, on the other hand, are more relationally aggressive. This is objectively verified by any given day in my house. Okay? As Haidt and Lukianoff put it, they are relationally aggressive more often. They're more likely to attack, quote, relationships, reputations, social status. And if that's the case, and that's kind of the world they're living in, unlike boys who can physically leave a negative social situation, quote, on social media, girls can never escape. Add to this the fact that social media profiles are all about comparison. People literally liking and voicing their approval or reacting with that dreaded, deafening silence. And it's not easy to see why heavy social media use is so strongly correlated with emotional harm. And mind you, with all this talk of children online, I haven't even had time to scratch the surface of the extremely disturbing and increasingly prevalent epidemic of child sexual exploitation, which has become more ubiquitous by far because of technologies such as social media, but also things such as Dropbox. Just to give you a horrifying glimpse of that world, know that each year the number of incidents of the exchange of child pornography reported doubles. Every year, doubles. Facebook is by far the most vigilant of all incident reporters, so good for them, I think. But for more on this, I recommend the work of the New York Times columnist Gabriel J.X. Dance. Like dance. Okay. That's a weird way to end that topic. I didn't plan that. So, but yeah, Gabriel J.X. Dance. So what do we do with all this? I have some suggestions. First, there are some technological ways to improve how we spend some time. One of which is an app that it's called Moment, which I use, and it catalogs how you use your time on your phone in a much more detailed way than mere screen time tallies do. It even sends you notifications when you've gone past your daily pickups, how many times you've picked that sucker up today. FYI, I'm over the limit today. Second, and I tip my hat to my wife for suggesting some of these, know when to disengage, especially people who are trolling, including people throwing up stuff just to make people outraged. You always have a choice. You don't always need to respond. The world will keep on turning if you don't. And realize, by the way, that people who do that, who do throw obnoxious stuff up, they're not necessarily bad people. They are not your enemies. You don't know why they're venting like they are, and they too are being manipulated by the powerful sources of social media. Third, there are ways to customize your feed. People can be blocked. If you find yourself always butting heads with the same person, Go ahead and stop them from showing up in your feed. They don't even need to know. And you could still stay friends in the real world, and that would probably help you to do so. Fourth, take responsibility for what your kids are doing online. Your house, your rules. Do what you can to encourage a healthier use of their time. A helpful idea, I know, trust me, 4 kids, we're tempted to give them that digital babysitter, okay? But a helpful idea, for example, would be to allow them to earn screen time. So if you want an hour on screens, you need to do 2 reading a book or outside, and you better come back in with some scrapes from your adventures to show for it. Fifth, if you've got a spouse and or kids, you should have total access to their devices. There's no reason why your wives or wives, why your husbands should not have your passwords. Wives should scroll through their husbands' accounts and vice versa if necessary, not out of suspicion, but out of loving accountability. Sixth, simply arming yourself with knowledge of what's going on when you turn on your devices is power in and of itself. Get into this stuff. Learning about the ways you're being manipulated is a value all by itself. By resisting extreme content and purposely checking out people with views different from the ones you naturally gravitate towards, you will become a better thinker anyway. And finally, consider deactivation. What would it look like for you to step away from Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, God help us, your Snapchat, or whatever? Send a message out to your friends that you're afraid you might lose touch with. Invite them to contact you through email or over the phone. Now, many of you may be hearing that last suggestion and thinking that that is the height of ridiculousness. You are crazy. I could never do that because reasons. And I understand some of you need it for work, granted, okay? But if you don't, understand that the first thing that an addict does when confronted with the need to stop using is to cook up a myriad of reasons why they need that to which they are addicted. And there are many aspects of social media that are, in fact, chemically addictive. I've done a fair amount of my own ministry with addicts. And one of the most helpful ways that I've found to help conceptualize addiction is as a self-perpetuating parasite. It eats whatever it has to in order to keep going and growing. It eats your excuses up, your resources, your relationships, your possessions, your relationship with God. And it does so solely for the purpose of keeping itself going. It's a sunny day out today. I should drink. It's a rainy day out today. I should drink. There's reason for celebrate. I should drink. Today sucks and life sucks. I just need to drink. It eats up any piece of you it can get for no reason than to get you to do it once more. And the first step to freedom is realizing that it's there and saying, no, you self-perpetuating parasite. I don't need you. You need me. Only through realizing this can we walk towards freedom and take the necessary steps to reclaiming our time and our minds that have been given to us, not for the glory of some Silicon Valley tycoon, but for the glory of God. We'll open it up for questions. Oh, we got a big one there from, oh look, Guillaume. He doesn't hit me from the front row. Questions in here? Yeah, Jen.
Do you happen to know the brain centers in which
I do not know the name of the brain center in which addictive behaviors are attenuated. I may have known it at one point, but no longer do. Yeah. I believe so. What the bleep do we know movie? Okay. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we got a recommendation here, which again I think helps with knowledge. A film. I can't vet it, but I trust Jen's judgment here. So it's called "What the Bleep Do We Know," and it talks about the addictive mechanisms in our brain, and I mean the kinds of things that have characteristics of addiction, right? Like these little things that trigger our reward centers to keep us doing things. I mean, I think of it this way too sometimes, that like a lot of our society kind of fights against like a healthy brain, right? Like that. So in other words, like we have a lot of ways to reward ourselves for doing nothing, whereas we should reward ourselves like just for the sake of experiencing the reward. We're like mice in cages that are just able to sip that drug that, and the mice keeps going back and going back and going back. Like that's literally like what a lot of our lives are, where the way that the Lord designed them to work was actually you get a reward after doing things that are truly valuable and that are truly important, right? So like my daughter Caroline just said hi on here, and I remember a few weeks ago that she choreographed this really cool dance and performed it for us. And afterwards, we congratulated her. She feels like she's on top of the world. Like that's how that brain function is supposed to work. It's not supposed to work by me saying, I could go somewhere on my phone and get that right now. Do it right now. Do it right now. Yeah. Yeah. And you're doing nothing and just rewarding yourself. Like chocolates for me for doing something good. Okay. Let's read Guillaume. Oh, thank you, Steve. You're very kind. I miss you. Okay. All right. Doug, would you beautifully described the hacking of the brain to get us hooked and drive us to engage in less than awesome purposes on social media platforms. Is there a way to just reroute the drive to motivate us toward good ends, or is this hacking a fundamentally problematic shortcut that we can't use even for good ends? That is, no doping my brain to love reading the Bible. Yeah, I think that you can do brain hacks, but I think it may be foolhardy to think that you can outsmart technology. And if that's not quite true in our day, I expect that it soon will be. But I mean, already there's ways in which it. But yeah, I think I think by not figuring out like what those rewards are that you constantly go to, right, and not giving them to yourself until you've accomplished goals, I think can be a very, very important brain hack. Doing something rewarding while you're trying to discipline yourself, so that your brain associates it with that, is also kind of important. Like I'd be very surprised if there's not some kind of brain chemical interaction between the coffee that I love to drink and my Bible that I love to read when I wake up early in the morning. You know what I'm saying? Like that becomes an enjoyable experience, and because I've made that experience rewarding. If, however, I was doing something unpleasant and doing that activity, like reading my Bible or maybe listening to the scriptures or something, like If I'm doing something unpleasant, then I might associate that with something unpleasant. But I also acknowledge that brain chemistry is probably more complicated than that too. So that's why I'm a little skeptical of my own ability to do it to myself. Although I think like properly using rewards in your life is probably the best way to do it. But the reason I say that is because I can think of counterexamples too. Like if I need to, the other day I had to like clean some of the house because my mom was coming over for dinner, and to make it bearable, I put on like a podcast I like to listen to, right? And I don't think doing the unpleasant cleaning is making me hate the podcast more, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not sure, but I'm confused about how my own brain works. People who are paid big bucks by social media platforms, not as much, okay? So that's the thing, is like, don't overestimate your own ability to kind of jack the system. That's my own thoughts on it. Like, I have no doubt that there are other things, cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, in like modifying our behavior. Like those are good habits that you can get into that do strike me as somewhat like brain hacky. I'll often tell people who are clearly like struggling from like a depression or anxiety or something, like, I'm not a professional at this by any means, but my amateurish advice is often like recognizing that what you're feeling right now is the depression talking to you is kind of like the first step. So just being able to like do that like is a brain hacky kind of thing. Being mindful, in other words, that my brain is taking me on a trip. And the reason why I'm feeling this way, the reason why I'm feeling anger or something like that, putting yourself in the position of an observer of your own brain and of your own thoughts can sometimes help, which I would consider pretty brain hacky. But I'll stop talking in my amateurish ways about this at any rate, and just see if anyone else has any questions. Okay, just one more check over here. Yes, social media can cause so much relationship issues, for sure. Okay, well, thank you guys for joining us. Get out of here a little bit early tonight. Happy to do so. At any rate, remember, next Monday night we'll be doing a 7th bonus section. So I really encourage you, if you're able to, join us for that. It should be good. It'll at least be up online. I'm not sure whether or not we'll be doing live Q&A and stuff like that. We just got to figure out how to do it. There's kind of some behind-the-scenes things we have to figure out. So, but we'll let you know in advance. Just be looking for that. It should be really good. You definitely at least want to check it out. So, thank you very much for joining us, and God bless you. Have a great night.